If you keep pushing the task, you'll hit a ceiling. If you fix the system, and the performance will just automatically move. You take a system that occasionally produces bad outcomes. When you add AI to that, you're going to produce bad outcomes at scale, right? So AI is a multiplier. The problem was never the people, the system is the system they're working in. So you have to stop asking, how can you get more out of people? And start asking what in the system should not really exist at all.
Welcome, everyone, to the VSERVE Ebusiness Solutions podcast on supply chain management, where we invite industry experts from all over the corner of the world to share their experiences and also gather some helpful tips along the way. And today I'm so excited because we're moving past the surface level of being and we're actually looking at the architecture of the whole business operations, right? So, our guest today is an operations transformation leader. He's a principal consultant at Lakeshore, and his career spans out with global powerhouses like Accenture, Deloitte, EY, Starbucks, Home Depot. I'm pretty sure I'm missing a few more, but he has been obsessed over a single fundamental question, which is what we understood was how do you design operational systems that allow organizations to perform at a higher level with a consistently adding complexities to the operations. So Joe, I'm so excited to have you here. Everybody, this is Joe Alexander. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Cynthia. Thanks for having me.
We are really excited to talk more with you in terms of supply chain, lean systems, workflow designs. A lot about AI because it's huge right now. But I always start with my first question, which is, how did you end up here? How did you end up in operations? Was that, what's the track like? Give us your career output. How did that happen?
Yeah, sure. Well, my background is industrial engineering, so I went to Georgia Tech years ago and studied industrial engineering. I always loved operations and systems and performance improvement work. So, getting out of college, I joined a manufacturing company, and then spent a lot of time at Home Depot, Starbucks, and then transitioned into consulting because I was always very excited about working with multiple companies and organizations and helping them improve their operational processes and systems. And I've
Yeah.
been doing that for a pretty long while now.
What do you like the most about, I guess, when it comes to the physics of operations? And I know there's like a lot of different things like accidental evolution, intentional design. There's so much technical conversation that revolves around, the evolving of manual workloads. So what's your experience? What's your experience, especially with like trigger points, transitionings and all of like, significant financial liabilities that you've seen in operations so far?
Yeah, great question. So, generally in operations, it's been evolving over the years. Now you have technology, you have AI, and a lot of things that are factors into making operations run more smoothly. From a trigger point perspective, I feel you have a lot of workarounds and which cause failure earlier on in the system. That's not always a bad thing because the systems are not designed to work efficiently. And as a result of that, when organizations don't spend the time to build a framework of designing your systems, you then have issues where your operators start having developing workarounds. And that results in bypassing some of the system capabilities because the system has failed them. They're having to send emails, check statuses, update spreadsheets, and
Yeah.
chase people down just to get the work done. So that becomes a big problem. And that's why fundamentally spending time to ensure that your system is functioning and helping your employees get their job done efficiently is very critical.
Exactly. And I completely understand. So when you look at those, delays, like, late orders and stuff like that, how would you say there's like that one or maybe two blind spots that you see in end-to-end supply chain that consistently kind of leads to that reactive measures from the operations team?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So a lot of leaders think when they have systems running, they have visibility, right? That's the whole idea. Is I want to understand how my operations are working. I need dashboards. I want to get the pulse of my operations for the and financials. Well, that's actually not the full picture, right? A lot of what happens is they have fragmented visibility. So every system shows its piece. You have functions where you have procurement, you have warehousing, and nobody sees the full picture end to end. And the biggest gap I see consistently is the handoff, for example, between warehouse, execution, and transportation. That's where things break. You have everyone being siloed, and you're transitioning from one from one function to another, and everything looks clean when you're dealing with the verticals. But when orders are flowing through, you start having issues where you have picks that are not being confirmed or closed out, and things like that. And I'll give you an example. One of the projects I worked on in the past, where walked into an operation, everything looked great, everything looked clean in the system. Orders were picked, they were being confirmed, processed, but they had a issue where they were manually staging products, right? The systems weren't really supporting them doing that systemically from a transportation standpoint, staging. So actually, you have products being loaded onto a truck that didn't actually match what the system said, right? So you have trucks leaving short, and then
Right.
the first signal is when they now find out is a customer escalation where a customer is saying, "I didn't get my order," or "My order was not complete." And at that point, the cost is already very high. And now you start expediting, you start doing rework, and you have
Yep.
a frustrated customer, right? So the issue
Yeah.
was not really in the technology, but nobody really took the time to evaluate connected visibility across the full flow. And until you have that, you're always in a reactive mode.
So, what do you do in that kind of scenario? Like, how do you create that visibility? Because I have like my previous, workplace. I've had that experiences, and I think it was always blamed on like easiest way to do is blame on technology. So, how did
Right.
you, create that visibility within the team?
Yeah. So in a case like that, you need to take a step back and you need to have set up a cross functional team or a workforce where you have experts or subject matter experts for each from each department that understand how their processes work, right?
Mhm.
You can't solve this kind of problem in silos. And of course, you need technology, the technology IT team also on board to help out with mapping out the process. But you need the folks that actually understand the business and work
Right.
in those different functions, coming together in a room, right? And then working through this with working sessions, workshops, where you're mapping the end-to-end flow from when a product comes into the facility, where does it go? You know, what systemic functions do we need to ensure are actually supporting to ensure that the product is put where it's supposed to be. When we have an order, where do we pick the product from? Where do we stage it? And where do we also, when do we ship it? And also metrics to help guide and a visibility standpoint that the order is complete and shipped out to the customer. When you have these folks separately doing, working on their own, trying to perfect their own silos, that's where you have breakdowns and you have gaps where my picking is going great, I'm picking great, but now when I have to ship, there's a disconnect there because you haven't spent that time to map, okay, if when something's getting picked and stored, how do I make sure that it's syncing back to what the customer ordered? What are the ideal checks I need to have in a system in place and make sure that I'm loading the product correctly, matching it to the invoices and BOLs and things like that to ensure that everything flows smoothly. So you need to bring the folks that actually understand the business in the room and map this out. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of challenging processes, but ultimately, uh, that's what needs to happen, and everyone needs to be aligned. That we need this business to be successful. We're not focused on just our functions being successful, because when we do that, the business overall will struggle.
Exactly. And it's more based on like workflows, right? To make sure you have that information, you have a clear
Absolutely,
workflow for each team, right? So
absolutely.
when when you see these, I'm pretty sure there are workflows, but people don't follow them, right? Like there's so many situations, we have so many spreadsheets out there, and nobody's actually using them. They're just using it to fill the information because they have to submit it to their manager at the end of the day. So how do you see that as I think it's called more like the invisible labor recovery that you see when a company kind of moves to these automated workflow. How do you see that, and how do you fix that?
Yeah, so I think you have to take a step back and ultimately simplify the system, right? So something that always happens is the system is set up to solve a specific problem, but sometimes the capabilities of the system, for example, a company could buy SAP and all the capabilities are not turned on functionally,
Yeah.
and then you're rushing the process and not taking the time to map the operational processes within the business to the systemic solution, right? So what happens there is you now start having an operator saying, well, this is not helping me put the item in the right location in my warehouse, as an example. So since that function is a problem, I'm going to build a spreadsheet and manually track it, right? So the time that wasn't taken up front to map the processes of the functions of the business to the system so the system can be configured to support the business function. And that frustrates a lot of employees where now they start having all these manual workarounds, spreadsheets flying all over the place, right? And then you have these disconnect of now I don't trust the system anymore. I'm going to do a workaround or bypass it. And then you start having the breakdown of integrity of data, right? And that's where when you have a standard system working perfectly, then communication starts to break down. Data doesn't flow all the way through, and then ultimately your customer suffers. So taking that step back to ensure that if we have a system that we've invested in, is it mapped and functioning correctly? Have we taken the time to ensure that it's supporting our business function? And if not, what do we need to build in and ensure that everybody understands this is how we to solve these problems going forward? And you have to have buy-in from the day-to-day people doing this. You can't be doing
Exactly.
this in a back room somewhere with executives mapping everything on the board. You have to get out to the floor, walk the process, have the people that use the system involved, and have them in the room because they will be the ones stuck with using the system. And if they don't trust the system because the system cannot support what they're doing, then that becomes a problem, and things just go downhill from there.
Exactly. And this kind of leads me to my next question actually. When you see leaders looking at making mistake of they don't look at the whole system, right? They pick and choose. There's like single task versus the whole system. Because obviously the whole system is somehow flawed and needs to be worked, even though you can nitpick within the system. So how do you address those issues? How do you address those leaders that only see a part of the problem and not the whole system together?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So in that case, when leaders, I mean, it's very convenient to manage tasks, right? Tasks are
Yeah.
easy to see, easy to measure, easy to manage. You can just walk your operational floor and see if people are doing their work,
Yeah.
check your pick rate, stop by and coach somebody, right? That feels like leadership, right? But system problems are different, right? You have like fundamental issues. For example, in a warehouse, you could have bad slotting, poor data integrity, or disconnected planning processes, right? Those are harder to diagnose and require cross-functional changes that nobody owns, right? So leaders end up optimizing the symptom instead of the cause, and focused on tasks versus the whole picture, right? And as an example, one of my past engagements, we were working at a warehouse that was focused on picking productivity, right? They were
Hmm.
hitting their numbers consistently, but accuracy problems kept showing up, which means they were supposed to pick an item for a customer, but they were either picking the wrong item or picking the wrong quantity, right? So these problems kept showing up, and you start asking what's happening. They have great numbers, right? But the real issue there was slotting, right? You had high volume items that weren't positioned in the right locations in the warehouse, and you had poor pick paths And of course, that was causing a lot of inefficiencies and errors, right? So once we fixed the slotting, the pick pass, and the flow to ensure that fast moving materials are in the closer, in the warehouse where you can easily pick them. And the flow mappings also makes a lot more sense where you're not wasting time walking all over the warehouse. Then the accuracy improved without pushing anybody harder. And so that's the key point. If you keep pushing the task, you'll hit a ceiling.
Yeah.
If you fix the system, then the performance will just automatically move on its own.
That makes sense, right? Fix the system and everything kind of fixes itself. So yeah. So when you're looking at your background in lean systems, how do you redefine the whole concept of waste time? Like when you're evaluating somebody with a purely digital process. I think there's a lot of talk in terms of global order to cash cycle. How do you address that?
Right.
How do you define that?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest mistake I see people make is the thinking that lean only applies to the shop floor, but it doesn't. I mean, it applies to digital workflows as well. The same waste exists in digital environments. It's just harder to see, right? You can't touch it, feel it, like in a manufacturing or distribution environment. But so you still have over processing, which shows up when you have duplicate data entry, as an example. You still have waiting, which shows up when you have work sitting in approval queues waiting for somebody to approve them. You still have rework, which is just corrections happening downstream because something was done wrongly upstream and you have to redo it again. And then to your point on order to cash, here's a scenario I've seen play out. An order to cash process where a customer is being entered into three different systems, right? Each one has slightly different rules, and then mismatches don't surface right away. But weeks later, after the customer has it's getting paid or is paid for the service, you start having some billing errors and customer disputes where, well, this is not what I ordered. You have something in one system is not matching something in another system, and then now the waste is real and it's just not visible. So you have to train yourself to see a digital workflow the same way you'd see a production line. Where's work waiting? Where's work accumulating? Where are you repeating things, right? And where is it being corrected? And the same principles will apply pretty much directly in a digital environment.
Have so many questions here because it's like you have led transformations for Starbucks and Home Depot and other areas, but I do want to move to AI too. But one quick question is, what is like one of the core system design principles that you've used with these kind of giants that you think that people should implement today immediately to reduce those complexity from the very beginning?
Absolutely. Great questions again. And I keep coming back to this. You have to design for end to end flow instead of functional performance. I know I mentioned that earlier. That's the
Yeah.
key principle. And then you have a lot of mid-market companies, they're grown up pretty fast. But they're built around functions. You have sales, you have
Yeah.
procurement, you have warehouse, transportation. And each one, they have their own goals, their own metrics, have their own ways of working. And individually, they all look great, right? But collectively, you're having a lot of issues, right? Where you're not ultimately taking care of your customer. And I'll think of an example in the past where we assessed one of the clients in the past. And every department, again, we're hitting their numbers. Procurement was great. Warehouse was having great pick rates. Transportation
Yeah.
on time, perfect, right? But customers were still getting late orders. How would you expect that to still happen when everybody's, hitting on all cylinders, right? But when
Yeah.
we mapped the actual end-to-end flow, well, we saw that delays were happening in handoffs. So work was sitting in between steps, and then priorities were not aligned across teams, right? You have warehouse saying, I want to make sure I have perfect pick rates, right? Transportation is focused on time delivery, right?
Yeah.
So the shift is moving from asking, how is each team performing, to asking, is the work actually flowing, right? That one question changes how you look at everything. You have to take a step back from focused on individual functions and look at the big picture and ensure that everything flows smoothly end to end.
Wow. Okay. Well, and yeah, I mean end to end. That's where we're sticking with this podcast framework, right? End to end. So moving on to the biggest thing I think that everybody wants to talk about nowadays is AI, right? So
Yes.
automation, the reality of it, does it work on broken systems? How do you redesign it? Is it supposed to just support one aspect of your operations, or is it, your complete end-to-end support? So I know where this is going, but I read a post of yours where you recently stated that AI cannot fix a broken system. So I would love to hear more on that. What is your take on that? How do you add AI to a manual workflow? What are the primary technical failures that you have encountered, over the few months that you've been working with AI?
Sure, absolutely. Great question, Cynthia. You're right. There's a lot of buzz out there now about AI and everyone getting excited about applying AI to their businesses and processes and workflows, right? But one thing you have to take a step back and really be mindful of is that, you take a system that occasionally produces bad outcomes. When you add AI to that, you're going to produce bad outcomes at scale, right? So AI is a multiplier. It accelerates whatever system you have underneath it. If you have a great foundation, you get leverage, right? You can multiply and, the sky's the ceiling, right? But if you have a weak foundation, you're going to end up having amplified problems. And as an example, one of the projects in the past here, where our operation was rolling out AI-driven order routing, the concept was solid, right? But their inventory accuracy was not reliable. But AI was built on the foundation of assuming that inventory accuracy was working great, right? But AI now started making decisions based on bad data, right? So before AI, the errors were occasional, and then people caught them manually. But after AI was implemented, well, now you start having a lot of errors. They're were consistent, and then that becomes so fast and creates a lot more issues for them to resolve. And then here's what happens at that point: people lose trust in the system, and they start going back to their manual checks on top of the automation. So you just wasted thousands of dollars here, leveraging AI because your foundation was not set correctly. And then you have these workarounds on top of technology that's supposed to be doing what it's supposed to do, but nobody trusts the system anymore. So that's why I'm always very passionate about, hey, before we think about AI, or hey, and it's not everything I need to throw AI in, automatically. There's just some fundamental things where you just have to simplify the process. And it's just maybe a couple of automation triggers for approvals and things like that. You don't need, not every business needs to just jump right into AI. First of all, you automate some tasks, the manual tasks that the foundation is pretty consistent. You have, again, with data behind it. And then you can now take that a step further and then augment with AI. But if you flip that and just say, oh yeah, let's just roll out and just implement, AI, then you see a lot of issues here where a lot of companies get frustrated with that because the foundational issue has not been addressed, which is poor data integrity and issues. But then you want AI to work great with a bad foundation. That's not going to work.
Yeah. And do you think the current role of AI in, operations overall is moving us away from the traditional dashboards and more towards like a system that can actually predict where a system bottleneck will occur, like say in advance?
Yeah, yeah, it's heading in that direction. Most organizations are not anywhere near ready for it, though. So dashboards tell you what happened, right? Prediction is trying to tell you what's going to happen.
Yeah.
The thing that people miss is that prediction only works when your underlying process is stable, like I mentioned, right? If your process is inconsistent, your prediction, is going to
It's
reflect.
gonna be
It's going to reflect a
yeah.
lot of inconsistency. It's just there's just no way around it, right?
Yeah.
So a past client, as an example, said, "Hey, we want to implement predictive stock out alerts." Right? Sounds like a great idea. I want to be able to know when I'm going to be running out of an item so I can pre-order it. But
Yeah.
then that was built on their inventory accuracy. It was below 90%. So the system was trying to predict future shortages with unreliable data. And then what happens is you get a lot of noise. The alerts that the system's supposed to be producing were not actionable. and then nobody trusts the system. And instead of improving decisions, it creates more confusion, right? So
Exactly.
the shift to producing is real, but it's not a technology upgrade. It's an operational maturity shift. You have to have the foundation come first. And once that foundation is solid, you can build upon that with predictive analytics and AI.
Wow. So any thoughts on your what you would suggest to companies out there when it comes to AI adaptability now?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is you take a step back and make sure, again, and going back to end flow, you want to understand what are you servicing? What's your customer? What's your end goal with your customer? Is it a widget? Are you selling a service? And look at the whole picture end to end, right? And all your different functions to get you to that end product, those have to be interconnected. If you're leveraging systems, ensure that the systems are supporting the business processes you have currently. If not, there needs to be collaboration to map both together to avoid workarounds. And the priority should be ensuring that the product flows throughout the system and not getting stuck in silos performing individually, right? That's what needs to be fixed. When that's solid, right? You can get this. You have also what's also very critical is your master data integrity and your systems being connected, right? If your fundamental data is it's great and accurate, then there's opportunities for you to build upon that with automation and AI, because now I know if an item, if the system tells me an item is in one location, I know it's there, right? A client I'm working with, as an example, right now, we're having challenges because the time wasn't taken up front to
Mhm.
ensure that the item master data was correct. So it was missing a lot of attributes. We're missing dimensions, location sizes, weights, and dims. And when you put an item in a location, the system says it's there. You go there, it's not there, right? And then you're spending 20 to 30 minutes looking for that item because we didn't take the time to ensure that the system was mapped correctly up front. It's causing a lot more rework, right? So you have to take that time up front to build the system and map it to your processes end to end so that you avoid a lot of these headaches downstream. So that's very critical as you think about this, and it's something I'm very passionate about.
Wow. And you can hear it in the way you explain it also. It's made very clear. Obviously it's such a heavy topic, but the way you've explained it, it's like, work on your foundation first and then kind of, climb the stairs. So I know we're running out of time, but I have so many things to cover here. And one thing I think I'm just gonna like put it down in one question here is there's so many regulations that are going on in 2026. I mean, I think the big word in 2026 is regulations for a lot of these companies, the way they're doing their freight work, the way they're having to transform their operations from, offshoring to back to, their own country or their own area. What have you kind of been seeing in terms of forcing a fundamental redesign when it comes to distribution networks, especially I believe you are in the Atlanta area, so that East Coast operators, but also the global presence. Like, how have you seen that change over the years?
Yes, yeah, I've seen a lot more focus now with this current regulations where now you're looking more of getting products to customers more efficiently. They're looking at more regionalized models from a network design perspective. Emissions is a big deal. So your carbon footprint, how
Yeah.
much time you spend, how much resources and dollars you're spending on fuel and transportation and things like that. So a lot of companies are taking a step back to look more at regional models. Picture Amazon as an example, where they have key distribution centers in hubs where that
Yeah.
they can service a lot of customers in that area and not having to ship something from California all the way down to Atlanta. So that's
Exactly.
been the big change and shift. And a lot of companies are also trying to leverage technology to see how they can get more efficient. But again, like I said earlier, time has to be taken up front, sure that the systems are designed correctly and not rushed A lot of folks are rushing into we need to just hit the ground running, and you're
Yeah.
skipping a lot of steps, and it's causing a lot of issues downstream where now you have to hit the reset button and go back to what you should have done months ago, which causes a lot of frustration, adds a lot more cost. And again, ultimately the customer suffers and the business suffers as well. So that's really what's happening now. I think a lot of people are just looking at smarter ways of doing things, but to be more efficient, do more with less. But the key thing I'll leave you with is, ultimately, from a closing perspective, I think most leaders are trying to fix performance by demanding more from their teams. The problem was never the people, the system is the system they're working in. So you have to stop asking, how can we get more out of people? And start asking what in the system should not really exist at all. What are the steps? What are the things that we shouldn't even have designed in the first place? Get those out of the system without the flow, because you remove friction, rework, unnecessary coordination, and then performance will take care of itself. You have to design a system right with good performance will just become a natural result.
Right. I mean, that is like such a good place to, kind of stop as well. Um, so much to think about today. Such a powerful reminder that, we shouldn't like just intentionally design our task, but think from end to end about our systems and design our whole
Close.
system versus, specifics. So, Joe, this has been such an insightful, for me especially, as I know I've gone through some of those in my early careers, and having to learn these different things really help. Any last thoughts, any last advice that you would leave the future generation, people like us who are still learning a lot about operations and AI and all of these things?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I would say the last thing would be you want to, and I've mentioned this already, don't be short-sighted and focused in your own box, right?
Mhm.
Um, Take a step back, look at the big picture, and look at what are we ultimately trying to solve for, right?
Yeah.
That's why I got out of industry going into consulting, because I wanted to see more than just what I was just doing in industry, right? One function, right? You have to take that step back, look at the big picture, and then try and understand really how all these functions play with each other and how they interact, and make sure that what you're solving a problem in one area is not causing an issue elsewhere. And think about that end-to-end flow to ensure that whatever product or service you're selling to your customers, it's mapped end to end and supported by every function, everyone working towards one goal versus going at it separately. And then once you have that right and your foundation is great, then you can build upon with technology and AI to leverage and accelerate your
That is perfect. Well, Joe, I hope you had a good time today at our podcast.
great. I
We
enjoyed
surely
it.
did. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good day. Thank you.
You too, Cynthia. Thanks for having me. It was fun. Thank you.
Same here.